What is up, Edison duelists? This is Dionysus, aka Young Puds, coming at you guys with the most shameless hype beast Gigavise content you could ever imagine. We are doing a tier list. What are we discussing today? The threats, the problem cards. I have nearly 100 Edison Format Yu-Gi-Oh cards ready to go on this tier list, and I want to discuss each of them and how big of a threat they pose to Gigavise. So these are some main deck cards, pretty much any side deck card you could think of. And I just want to discuss the best cards that you can use to defeat Gigavise, or preferably, if you are a Gigavise player, what cards you need to be the most concerned about. So let's jump right into it. First, these three cards can really go together. This is Mystical Space Typhoon, Dust Tornado, and Twister. And these cards are very, very good. They can interrupt your combo. However, you have to keep in mind that they do have to be set first to interrupt your combo. They can be a problem, especially MST, because they can stop. Like sometimes you really need to have your discard trap or your torrential, your mirror force, something like that stick, and mirror force can present a problem. And also if they're using it well, they can hit a key DDR, they can hit a miracle fertilizer, and that can really stop you. But sometimes you also just have a lot of gas in the tank. So these are definitely a good cards, but I think they're going to be a perfect example of a B tier threat. This is definitely something you need to consider. This is definitely something you should expect to see sided in against you. However, there are much, much bigger problems out there. And so just to briefly go over our tiers, S tier threats, these are threats that are going to be very hard to deal with, very accessible for a lot of decks, and are definitely going to be something that you need to have a really solid game plan for. A tier threats are threats that are pretty scary, can definitely really shut you down, but they might be easier to deal with. They might be a little less accessible. Some inaccessible threats I think can be so powerful that they'll jump to an S tier threat. That is something I'm considering. B tier threats are exactly like this. A C tier threat is something that in some circumstances it can stop you, but more often than not, you're just going to be able to out it really easily. And then D tier threats are threats that you don't really care about all that much, but might get in the way a little bit. So what is an example of a D tier threat? Well, these three cards, this little trio of stall floodgates, I think are a perfect example of a D tier threat. While it is annoying if maybe they flip gravity bind on you for game, or when you're pushing for game, if the gravity bind can't attack, these other two cards, like they're really just slowing you down. If anything, you can make a Mistworm, you can make a Black Rose to out them as part of your combo, even a Bryanak, and the decks that are playing them are going to be really slow decks, which means you can just take your time amassing advantage. I mean, I'm talking like Pac-Man is the type of thing that you might run into with these cards. So moving on, this next floodgate here is Prohibition. Prohibition seems really good. What if you call Lone Fire Blossom? Hey, I can't combo. What if you call Gigaplant? Man, I'm really stuck. But the thing is, if you call Lone Fire Blossom, more often than not, I can just find my way to a Gigaplant. You call Gigaplant, I can just, play Titanial Turbo, and the deck is still pretty functioning. And I've gotten Prohibition played on me quite a bit, and it's never, I really think it has never actually won a game. And it's also just a pretty easy to floodgate out. We're playing plenty of outs for the floodgate, so I would consider this to be a C tier threat. It's kind of fringe where it's actually going to be a huge problem. You can play around it pretty easily, and then of course it can be outed just as easily as any face-up spell or trap floodgate. Let's continue discussing these. This is Skill Drain. This is a real big problem because the decks that are going to be using Skill Drain, they are going to be able to put out threats that are bigger than Gigaplant. So sometimes, you're under Skill Drain and you're like, well, I don't care. I have a Gigaplant. Maybe I've already found my way to Titanial. You can still use Lone Fire under Skill Drain. So for that reason, it's not so bad, but usually the decks can handle just a 2400 vanilla that resummons itself with Supervised. and it can also interrupt your combo on Gigaplant. So I do consider skill drain to be a bigger problem. So I'll go ahead and put it in B tier. Royal Oppression. This card is really good. This card is good before you combo. This card is fantastic. Even after combo, sometimes, you know, you'll try and extend a little further to push for game, and then they'll hit your Gigaplant. They'll just pay 1,600 life points. They'll negate the Gigaplant. They'll negate the Supervise, and then you'll find yourself in a really bad position. So this is like also a card that is just so common. It slots into so many decks. It is fairly easy to out, you know, just the same as any of these other floodgates, but it is such a pervasive threat. It is such a big problem for the deck. It has applications, you know, into an established board, into a non-established board. It is such a problem that I am going to consider it to be our first S tier threat. This is just the kind of thing that is going to be really, really big, and it's going to completely shut you down. It's going to completely be locking you out of the game. It is a big, big problem. Speaking of big problems, these next two kind of go together. This is Dimensional Fissure and Macrocosmos. I'm going to consider these to be A tier threats. Now, they're not going to be quite as common, but you really are going to have a lot of trouble playing through them. Can still use Lone Fire's effect, but then that Lone Fire is going to be banished. So unless you have DDRs at the ready, these are going to be a big problem. But even more than that, they're going to hinder your setup more often than not. They're going to make your Miracle Fertilizers dead if you don't already have plants in grave. That's a problem. And while these cards are up, you can't even activate Foolish Burial or hit an Armory. So for that reason alone, that's what I think bumps them up from B tier to A tier, is they have the potential to just break cards in your deck. However, the fact that you can still use Lone Fire under them does keep them out of S tier. Also, they're going to really restrict what kind of cards your opponent can play. So, you know, even if they have Defissure Macro up, you know, what are they going to do? They're going to put a DD Survivor up. Gigaplant beats over DD Survivor. You can win games by just hitting them for 600 over and over and over again, because Macro Stun is not a good deck. I do think these cards have a nice home in 6 Sams, and that can be a little more threatening because that deck at least does something. But I think A tier is where these kind of cards are going to go. Next up, Mask of Restrict. This is maybe the strongest card, the strongest floodgate against Gigavise. It's actually insane how good it is. I really just like, I cannot stress that enough. Let's make this just a little smaller here. Perfect. Basically, it's going to stop you from starting your combo because you can't use Lone Fire. And then even if you have an established board, you can't use Stardust Dragon with this up. You can't use Titanial with this up. So it's just, it's such a problem. You have to have a plan ready to remove it. It's easy to remove because it's just a face-up spell and trap, but similar to Royal Oppression, it is going to cause such a problem. It's also a deck that pretty much everything except for frog decks are going to be able to side in against you, and of course the mirror, but that's a whole different scenario. We'll talk about that in a bit. So Mask of Restrict, huge problem. Next up, Power Filter. I don't know if I've ever seen this card sided in against me, but I gotta say, you know, preventing me from summoning the weaker monsters seems good, but we have plenty of ways to cheat out Gigaplant even under Power Filter. So I would just consider it C tier. I don't know if I've seen any decks running it. I just don't consider it to be that big of a problem. Next up, Goes in Match. Goes in Match is another card that I don't see too often. The thing is, it's pretty good because, you know, we have a lot of Earths, but it really is going to limit you. So I'm going to consider Goes in Match a B tier threat because we do have some plays that we can still go through with it. Like you can get a Gigaplant onto the field, and if you have Nettles in the mix, you can make 8s and still win with that. So I'd consider a B tier threat. You know, we have some options under it. It's also just not the most common thing that you're going to have to worry about. A lot of decks can't really support it. Rivalry of Warlords is a similar thing. You know, we can still use Lone Fire into Gigaplant, into Titanial, and that could be enough to solo some decks. And again, you know, it's not the most common card. You're going to have a pretty easy time playing into decks that are using this because they're just going to be weaker decks. You know what I mean? So Chosen, Rivalry, both B tier cards. Next up, Summon Limit. This is a pretty interesting card. I think it can present a big problem. It's also not too commonly used, just because there's a lot more powerful floodgates that are out there. But I would say this is a B tier. You know, again, it's going to stop your combos, but you know, you can definitely play through it. You know, even just like Lone Fire into Titanial. Okay, 2 summons, whatever. Now we have a Titanial up. You know, that's going to be nuts. Even like Lone Fire Gigaplant with protection, that's going to be pretty good. So we have some plays, but it's definitely going to shut us down from really going nuts. So I would put that in here. Next up, we are going to have another S tier, and this is going to be Anti-Spell Fragrance. This card is crazy. This card can literally be an FTK. You basically, you know, you better have an MST to chain to it, or Twister to chain to it, or a Breaker to out it, or you're just going to have to set your whole hand. Glads loves to run this thing, and then you set your whole hand, and then they just destroy it with Bestiary and Gazirus. So that can be a really big problem. So for that reason, I would definitely consider this to be an S tier threat. Definitely one of the best floodgates against us. Continuing on, going through all these floodgates here. Grave of the Super Ancient Organism. This kind of falls into the same vein as Power Filter, and it's another card that just has never been used against me. So I am going to actually have to look up to see what it does, because it has been so long since I've seen it. So they can't, special level 6 or higher special summon monsters on the field cannot declare attacks or activate their effects. So that is a pretty big problem for us. Definitely tough to play through, but again, there's just not a lot of decks that are playing this. Frankly, it seems actually pretty good against Gigavise. I'd give it an A tier, but just because it isn't seen often enough, I would give it a threat level of B. All right, folks. Zombie World. This is a card that is similar to Grave of the Super Ancient Organisms. I don't see a lot. It has been activated on me a few times, but this is such a devastating card. It's definitely going in S tier, and I'm actually going to give it, if this tier list would work here, the #1 spot in S tier, because it's shutting off so many parts of your deck. You can't use Lone Fire Blossom. Can't use Titanial because they need to be planned. You can't use Mark of the Rose. You can't use Miracle Fertilizer. You can't even Tribute Summon a Gigaplant. This card, it's ending your whole career. You need to have an answer to it, and worse than that, it's a spell. So they can even activate it onto your established board and then start using targeting traps to pick apart your board. So Zombie World, huge problem. Now, however, Necro Valley, not a problem at all. I will admit, it shuts down Mark of the Rose, it shuts down Miracle Fertilizer, it even shuts down Supervise Effect to bring back a Gigaplant. However, it doesn't stop Gigaplant's effect. And that is so crazy strong, because it means all you have to do is stick a Gigaplant, give it Supervise, make Black Rose Dragon. Black Rose Dragon is going to destroy Necro Valley, and you'll still get the Supervise back. So for that reason, you know, I think Necro Valley is just really not that big of a threat. It seems really good on paper, but in practice, it's just too easy to play through, win. So that's all the spell and trap floodgates that I think are really relevant. Let's talk about monster floodgates. Starting off right away here, Fossil Dyna. Fossil Dyna is really good. This is going to be one of the most common cards, like pretty much almost any deck. You should just expect that they are going to have Fossil Dyna. Any set in main in games 2 or 3, you should consider the option that it's Fossil Dyna. And you know, if they normal summon it and stick it, it can be a huge problem. However, it has low enough attack points that Nettles can crash with it, which is a nice out. You can you know, handle it with Mark of the Rose as just an inherent out. You're going to be citing in hate for it. And even if it's set, you can just make a Stardust. So it's definitely a big problem. It's definitely a really good card against us. However, really, because of Stardust being able to prevent its board wipe effect, I have to keep it out of S tier. I'm going to put it in A tier. Probably the top of A tier. It's a big problem, but it's not so much of a problem that we can't answer it. Similarly, I'm going to say Archlord Christia is another A tier threat. This card is a really big problem. However, Mark of the Rose is such a nice, easy, searchable out to it. And then, of course, we're also going to be citing in answers to it, like Book of Moon, Lightning Vortex, those types of cards. So Christia is definitely a big problem, and it can steal games from us. So A tier for sure, but it just has enough answers, and it's just uncommon enough that I would consider it to be A tier. Vanity's Fiend is an interesting case because it similar to Christia, it's got all the same outs, and the decks that play it just tend to have fewer backup options. So I almost want to put it in B tier because it's so common that you'll be able to like Mark of the Rose, a Vanity's Fiend, Book of Moon it, do your full combo, flip up Vanity's Fiend, and you're insulated from Gores. You can do that with Christia as well. But I feel like Vanity's Fiend is more often than not coming down with fewer back row. However, it is really something that can completely shut you down. So I would consider it to be another A tier threat. A big problem that you want to be prepared for. Jaugen the Spiritualist. Here's the thing about Jaugen. It has this special summoning prevention. It even has a board wipe effect, which is pretty cool. But its attack stat is so weak. And if they just try normal summon Jaugen, you can just summon Lone Fire and run over it. So it's a good card, it's a good floodgate, but it is just too easy to out that I can't put it any higher than B tier. The last special summoning monster floodgate, I am going to say Cactus Bouncer. This is a fantastic card. Usually the mirror can cite it, but little known fact, guys, all of my combos involve putting a plant on the field. So you can just normal summon Cactus Bouncer, and then I can't use Lone Fire to special summon. I'd have to like cheat out a Gigaplant. So for that reason, I actually do think Cactus Bouncer is really, really good. It is an A tier threat, I would say. There are definitely some outs to it, similar to these other special summon monsters. But this is really a fantastic choice. If you're playing a plant deck, definitely Cactus Bouncer is great. Even if you're not playing a plant deck, it's something that you could consider just as a turn 1 drop against Gigaplant. Big problems. All right, next to the two Banishers. Banisher of the Light is an interesting card. It's very similar to Banisher of the Radiance, but it only has 100 attack. So it's pretty uncommon that it's going to be used. And it is just so easy to be ran over. So similar to Jaugen. And it's so infrequently used and just strictly worse than Banisher of the Radiance. I would consider this to be a C tier threat. It's definitely going to stop you. It's going to cause all the same problems that Defissure Macro are causing, but it's just going to be really, really fragile. And if they're setting it, you're going to already have an established board before it does anything worthwhile. Banisher of the Radiance can present a much bigger issue. However, I would put it in B tier. It's definitely a problem. It's definitely something that you have to answer, but it's as simple as just Lone Fire summon Giga. They can't Honest, they can't protect it because of its own effect. So all you have to do is just stick a monster, run over it. Easy does it. Next up, Spell Canceller. I don't know if I've ever seen this card played in Edison format. It seems pretty good because we do play a lot of spells. However, it's just going to lose to Lone Fire. Like just Lone Fire summon Giga, get it off the field, and then do all your other spells. So for that reason, I would consider it to be a D tier option. Speaking of D tier options, Haiku the Ghost Destroyer. This is a card which is... people think it's good because I'm doing things like Mark of the Rose, or I'm wanting to have monsters in the graveyard that they're going to banish. But I cannot tell you how many times people summon a Kaiku, they use its effect, they banish a Gigaplant, they banish a Lone Fire from my grave, and it turns on my DDR, and then I win. It's crazy how often that happens. Kaiku, it's not worth it, folks. Not a good option. It's going to stop very, very few things. King Tiger Wangu, on the other hand, this card has presented a pretty serious problem for me in the past. However, it is pretty fragile. It's only 1400 attack. Breaker can beat over it. So it definitely can present a little bit of a problem, but it's also just, I don't feel that it's quite strong enough to really hack it. So I would consider this to be a C tier threat. All right. So those are kind of our hard floodgate monsters. Now we have like walking negates. We've got 3 of those that are really common in the format. The first is Gladiator Beast Heraclinos. This card is a problem. This card, if it sticks and your opponent just has a few cards in their hand to use its effect, you're going to lose. Especially if they have a War Chariot to back it up, you're definitely going to lose. There's so few outs to this that are so hard to get through against Glads. You know, we've tried playing things like Volcanic Queen down here to answer Heraclinos, but this card is such a huge problem constantly that it really seems like the best answer to it is just to not let them get it on the field. And that feels terrible, but this card is definitely the biggest threat to Gigavise. So S tier for sure, big problem if you're running into Glads. Thankfully, only Glads can put this thing on the field, but man, oh man, is this card a problem. Next kind of walking negate is Stardust Dragon Assault Mode. This is a good card. This is a very powerful card. Here's the thing though, I can't put it higher than C tier against us because all you have to do is Mark of the Rose, Book of Moon, Chalice, whatever, hit one thing on it, force out the negate, and then you can combo. So it can create some like checkmate scenarios, and okay, we'll put it up to the bottom of B because it can create some checkmate scenarios where you can't win, but it is so easy to answer that I can't put it any higher than B tier. Next up, Titanial. Titanial is an A tier threat. Fortunately, similar to Heraclinos, it is limited to other plant decks, so the Mirror, Quick Draw. But the fact that Titanial can negate Supervise, first of all, I still am running into people on ladder who don't know that Titanial can negate Supervise. Titanial can negate Supervise. All equip cards, just like part of what they do, it's a game mechanic. They are targeting. Titanial can negate them. So for that reason, she can really present a really big problem. A Titanial that sticks, it has to be answered, or you're just not going to be able to combo. You have to like get a Mark of the Rose off, which is tricky if they stick a turn 1 Titanial. Sometimes the best way to deal with Titanial is to summon your own and crash into it, and then try and make a main phase 2 board, which is just really subpar. So Titanial is definitely an A tier threat. Speaking of A tier threats, Cold Wave. This card is really good in the decks that support it. I'm talking Cold Wave Judgment Dragon, Cold Wave Gazaris, Cold Wave, plus anything. And also, like, all of our combos are dependent on spell and traps. So it's almost like Lotheb in Hearthstone. If you played that, like, it's just gonna stop us from being able to combo on one turn, and sometimes that enough is a big enough problem. It's also gonna stop any of our interaction to keep us alive if our opponent is just going for a big push, even like without a big JD Dad Gazaris type threat. Like it can just push through, prevent us from doing anything on the next turn, and then they push again. So Cold Wave is definitely a huge problem. I almost want to put it in S tier, but there are just there's not quite enough decks that are running Cold Wave and supporting it. So A tier threat, big problem for sure. Next up, Deck Devastation Virus. This is a D tier card. D for Deck Devi against us. It seems really good, but truthfully, the only situation where this is really going to matter is if they flip it and you have a Lone Fire in your hand and no Miracle Fertilizers and no Mark of the Rose DDR combos. We have too many ways to get back our Lone Fire. And we also have such a low monster count, it's just going to blank more often than not. So I really can't in good conscience put it any higher than D tier. However, the other virus, Eradicator Epidemic Virus, I am going to go ahead and consider this an S tier card against Gigavise. This card is so good. This card is so scary. It's literally an FTK if they resolve it first turn. It's so hard to win. I know I have like some videos on my channel where I managed to win through it, but like let's be honest, we can watch those and you can see that I got some anime tier part of the card's top decks to get out of those situations. Most of the time when I get Eradicated, I'm losing on the spot. So now let's talk about board wipes. Some of these are just inherent to decks, some of these you see cited in, a little mix of both. But the first board wipe I want to talk about is Needle Sealing. This is a really, really good card, and it's going to clear your whole board. They can activate it into an established board. You need to have a Stardust up to play around it. It can really trip you up because you see, oh, torrential. They've already used their torrential, and then they hit you with the Needle Sealing. Absolutely terrible. Very, very sneaky. However, if you're not aware of it, it's definitely an A tier, an S tier threat. But now that you've watched the video and you're expecting it, you can play around it. You're playing around back row anyways. You're looking for your sweepers. You're looking for, making Stardust first. You're playing into your back row smart. That is just going to limit the effectiveness of back row. I'm going to put it in B tier. Next up, Elemental Hero Absolute Zero. This is a card that is really, really good when it goes off if you're not careful. However, it's so easy to put your Titanial in defense, make a Black Brute Drago, play around this card, that while it definitely can be a problem sometimes, I'm going to put it at the top of C tier because we have so many answers that just let us not care about this card at all. Also, I can't tell you how many times against like Hero Frog decks, they'll end on an absolute zero and be like, okay, good, I'm safe. And then you just mark the rows and make a couple other monsters and swing for game. So really, I can't justify putting it any higher than C tier. Lightning Vortex. This is a really, really good card against us. It's so tricky because a lot of turn one lines, you can't just make Stardust and blanket. However, that's going to a lot of times mean you just have like a really weaker board. And so Lightning Vortex can be such a blowout. It answers your Titanial. It is a big problem for us for sure. However, because we do have Stardust to negate it, I'm going to leave it in A tier. But it definitely can cause problems. And, just the fact that you have to consider, okay, do I want to make Stardust in games 2 and 3 because they probably cited in Lightning Vortexes, and you'll try and do that, and then you make a weaker board and they don't have Lightning Vortex, and you get punished for not making Titanial, and then the opposite happens. You're like, okay, well, there's a lot of punishes that this deck has, so I want to make a Titanial, and then they blow you out with Lightning Vortex. So definitely a really, really strong card. Definitely an A tier. Next up, Book of Eclipse. This card seems like a really nice way to just put everything face down and continuing to combo. You'll probably want to play this card if you're playing, like a heavy combo deck that just needs to put everything face down, and then it can out our board with like a Black Rose or just a bunch of big monsters. However, the fact that we're playing cards like Threatening Roar in most of our lists, and especially we're leaving those in against the big combo decks, means that there's a pretty good chance we're going to get a bunch of draws and get everything flipped up anyways. I've also never actually seen this used against me, so this is kind of talking theory, but Book of Eclipse is a C tier card. It seems good, it's like good and modern, but I think we just have enough tools to survive the push, and it's not quite impactful enough that I can't rate it any higher than C tier. Cyber Eleton, on the other hand, this is a fantastic board wipe, only available to decks that contain light machines. But, between Cyber Valley, Cyber Dragon, there's plenty of those. This card is a huge problem. It sends, it doesn't destroy. So it's such a clean way to out the Gigavise board. This absolutely belongs in A tier. It's a little costly to get going. Sometimes that can be really what's keeping it out of S tier, and not every deck can run it. But this is definitely a serious board wipe that you need to worry about. Black Rose Dragon is another board wipe that is really, really good against Gigavise. This is the main way that Black Wings is going to out your board. You can stop it with Stardust. It is also really predictable. Everyone has Black Rose in their deck. This is Edison Format. So I'm going to go ahead and put this at the top of B tier. It's really good, but it's pretty easy to see it coming. It's pretty easy to interrupt. And of course, Stardust also negates it. All right, let's talk about Norlaris. Norlaris is a nice way to out our board. And it is also ostensibly an FTK, right? Wrong. I gotta say, because of cards like Miracle Fertilizer, because of cards like Dandelion, even like Gold Sarcophagus, if you get one of those off before they Norlaris you, I genuinely feel like it's over 50-50 that I win, even if I get Norlaris. You can also side in DD Crow to stop the Phantom of Chaos and shut it down pretty easily. It can still be an FTK, so I'm going to respect it enough to put it in B tier. Like, the main reason I will never take DD Crow out of my side deck is because this card exists, but I'll put it at the bottom of B tier. How about that? Judgment Dragon. This card is definitely hard to interrupt. This card is definitely a problem. It's a clean out to your board. It's a 3K monster. Huge problem. It's slow to get out, but you know, it's always going to be in the back of your mind in Lightsworn's. You know, sometimes Lightsworn's just has those insane high roll hands that just turbos it out. So I'll put it in B tier. It's not, you know, like a death sentence like some of these cards up here in A tier, but it definitely is a big problem. And if you don't have a Stardust, or they're able to just summon it, run over your Stardust, and then use its effect main 2, that's a pretty effective way to end the game. Speaking of ways to end the game, Dark Arm Dragon is another big threat. You know, I kind of say, like, I don't think Vayu Blackwings are necessarily that good of decks, but when they draw Dad, they definitely are. If you're getting hit with Dad, you're in trouble. You are running into big problems. All right, folks. Next up, two of some of my favorite cards, Lava Golem and Volcanic Queen. And as much as I like these, as cool as they are, I can't put Lava Golem or Volcanic Queen. I'll actually put Volcanic Queen in A tier, but Lava Golem is C tier. It is really cool the way it outs your board. However, it's really hard for Edison decks to capitalize off of it because it eats up your normal summon. That is going to really cause a lot. Even other, like, mirror match decks where we have you know, Miracle Fertilizer or Hidden Armory, like, that's, you actually need like a pretty specific hand to like Lava Golem and then continue to play through it. And Volcanic Queen, again, I used to side this in the mirror just for Titanial, but it's just not good enough. It's just not good enough. What can I say? D tier Volcanic Queen, C tier Lava Golem. Orphing Jar number 2. This is a funny card, and it is really good. And you know, I know it kind of was sold as like, okay, this is just the end-all be-all best card. However, all Gigavise players these days, we're all aware that Morphing Jar number 2 exists. And similar to Fossil Dyna, if you see a set in games 2 or 3, you just kind of want to consider, okay, could this be Morphing Jar number 2? And maybe think about making a Bryo or a Mistworm to clear it. So we have enough counterplay for it that I really can't justify putting it higher than A tier, but it is a really excellent board wipe, and it can cause a lot of problems if it hits some good mills. Let's talk Brain Control. Brain Control can sometimes be you know, targeted removal. Sometimes it can steal games, but let's be honest, it really should be sided out against this deck for like a Lightning Vortex or a better board wipe. Sometimes people leave it in. I really think it's suboptimal, but the fact that sometimes it can steal games, I'll give it to C tier, but really not a very good card against Gigavise, I gotta say. Swords of Concealing Light. This is a really cool card, the way it can just shut down your entire board, even after you've made the end board. So for that reason, it definitely is really good. It doesn't see a lot of play. I'm not really sure why. I think it's just, you know, it's pretty specific just for Gigavise, so it's eating up a lot of spaces in the side deck. And, you know, it's kind of only good against Gigavise, but it is really good for just setting our whole field face down. And it doesn't have the kind of costs like, you know, threatening to let us draw a bunch of cards like Book of Eclipse. And it is going to buy you some turns, you know, especially if we've gone really wide. This can be a really huge problem. Next up, we kind of have single targeted removal. Book of Moon. Book of Moon is such a good card. It's so flexible. You know, you could use it to eat a Titanial negate. You can use it to put a Stardust face down and then go Black Rose or something like that. And it's also, it can interrupt combo. You know, chaining Book of Moon to Supervise and putting the Gigaplant face down, especially if there isn't another Gigaplant already in graveyards. Book of Moon is so good, and you know, it's fragile like a lot of the other interruption that you have to set, but it's just powerful enough, frankly, that I gotta give it to be an S tier threat. Book of Moon is a big problem, and just because of its flexibility. I'm such a fan of Book of Moon, I really can't sing its praises enough. However, Soul Taker is a card that sometimes I've seen people use. I think the big appeal of it is it can make Black Brute Drago miss timing. However, it's too easy to negate with Titanial. It's too low impact. I think you'd just rather have something like Lightning Vortex. Frankly, we're not making Black Brute Drago often enough. So for that reason, I'm going to put this in here. It's just not very useful, frankly. DD Warrior Lady. This is a pretty good card. It's also something that you don't always see coming, so you want to really keep it in mind. Some decks can surprise you with it. You know, something like Fairies, Shining Angel decks, you're expecting to see it. Even Macro Stun, you expect to see it. But there's definitely some decks that'll put it in and it catches you off guard. But ultimately, I don't think it's impactful enough. I think like the best thing it can do is, you know, like banish your Stardust. But just getting one card banished, we have DDR in deck, so it's pretty easy to play through that. So I'm going to actually put DD Warrior Lady in C tier. I think it's just not impactful enough to really be earning a spot as a Gigavise counter. Next up, let's talk about the 3 discard traps. Let's talk about Karma Cut, Raigeki Break, and Phoenix Wing Wind Blast. Karma Cut, I'm going to put in as a B tier threat. This is something that is strong enough to end your combo if they use it at the right time. It can be really devastating if they banish both of your Gigaplants. That can present a pretty big problem sometimes. It's definitely, well, it's stronger than Raigeki Break, I guess. Raigeki Break is a good piece of interruption, but Stardust can negate it. And I think just the destruction is the least interesting. Titanial can negate it. So let's put Raigeki Break right there at the top of C tier. Phoenix Wing Wind Blast is going to go above Karma Cut. This is a solid piece of interaction. I think also if you're in a situation where you're top decking and you're just trying to find combo, the fact that it sets you back a turn, that could be enough to win the game against you right there. So Phoenix Wing Wind Blast, definitely a substantial B tier threat. It's real, but you can always just, you know, you're ideally going to be Giant Trunade Heavy Storm, dropping a sweeper before you begin your combo. So you know, let's put Phoenix Wing Wind Blast in B tier. Next up, Offerings to the Doom. I'm just trying to be comprehensive here. I did see someone use this in Forgs to go with Reckless Greed, but similar to Raigeki Break, it's just not impactful enough. It's too easy to stop. It's too easy to hate. Next up, Compulsory Evacuation Device. This card is so good against us. I think more decks should be maining this, or at least having it in their side. It can be such a big problem, so devastating to get your Gigaplant compulsed and waste the Supervise like that. Definitely a solid card, but again, you're going to see a theme here with a lot of these traps. You're going to be, you know, not just recklessly playing into back row, but this can be a pretty big punish. Next up, Solemn Judgment. This card is crazy good. This is maybe the best trap in the game. It can even stop your Solemn Judgment, which is a huge problem. It can stop your Heavy Storm. It can stop your Giant Trunade. And it can stop any piece of interaction, and it can also stop your combo dead. It can stop Lone Fire before Lone Fire can use priority. Definitely A tier threat. Big problem if your opponent has Judgment. It's just going to be a lot harder to win. However, Bottomless Trap Hole, not so good because we have DDR. I'm going to actually consider Bottomless to be a C tier threat. It can interrupt you, but you can stop it with Stardust if you've already got a Stardust on the field, and you can just play through it with DDR. So Bottomless, I would say C tier. Maybe even consider siding out your Bottomlesses, something like a Compulsory Evacuation Device. Gladiator Beast War Chariot is a huge problem. It is a counter trap. It is hard to play around. If it pairs with Heraklinos, it is going to be GG lights out. But thankfully, it can also just be cleared with your Sweeper, your Trunade, your Heavy Storm. Also, what's going to keep it out of the A tier is a lot of times it can be contributing to brick hands with GB players. It's also similar to Icarus Attack. It's really easy to read. You know, you can tell they have it, and you know, you're pretty much always assuming any set in Glads is going to have the potential to be a war chariot. So it's always going to be on your brain. So for that reason, we'll put it in B tier. Dimensional Prison is the same story as Bottomless, but it can also be negated with Titanial. We can get the recursion off for it. Really, the best thing it's doing is potentially removing your Stardust Dragon, but we should be playing around that no problem. Mirror Force, similar. It's a battle trap. You know, like battle traps are not going to impede your combo, and if you combo off completely and you see that your opponent has a set, you know it's probably a battle trap, and then you know, you could just end on Stardust Titanial to play around both of these two. So too easy to play around, definite C tier. Torrential Tribute, however, is a big problem right here next to Needle Sealing in B tier. This is a really good card. It can stop your whole combo. You know, even if they have Torrential and you say, okay, well, we'll make a Stardust to play around it, as soon as you drop the Nettles, they're going to flip Torrential and you're going to be set back. So you really have to consider Torrential, because it can be a very big issue for you. Next up, Forbidden Chalice, talking about these kind of you know, single target interaction points. Chalice is pretty good. I like it also because it's flexible. You know, if you don't have enough plants, you can chain it to a Titanial, or just to force out the Titanial to tribute herself and negate it. You know, if you end on Giga Titanial and they have one tribute trap and they tribute the Giga Plant, and then you use Chalice on the Titanial, they'll have to clear the Titanial as well. That is pretty good, and it is nice and flexible. And for that reason, I think it's, you know, it's another one of these traps that is a good enough point of interaction to be B tier. Fiendish Chain works similar to Chalice. It's not a quick play spell, but it does target, and it also leaves your monster on board. And we have so many big monsters that I don't feel like Fiendish Chain is quite impactful enough. You know, you can't Fiendish Chain a Lone Fire, tribute it on Prio before it can activate. Even like Titanial, you Fiendish Chain the Titanial. I contribute Titanial for its own effect for cost, and Fiendish Chain isn't going to work on it. So I'll put Fiendish Chain in C tier. Next up is Mind Crush. I have to say, if they hit Mind Crush and they wipe out all of your supervises, that feels like an S tier threat. However, there is a downside. It can miss, and even if they're holding it and they're waiting till you search it off of like a guaranteed power tool search or a hidden armory, I feel like I would just rather have a trap that's going to do a little bit more, something a little more high impact, a compulsory evacuation device, especially because we're not maining Mind Crush. Most decks, let's be real, it's going to be sided in. So while Mind Crush is super good, maybe in the mirror or something, I don't think it's high impact enough in enough matchups in Edison format to be anywhere higher than a C tier counterplay option. Another trap that you see cited in sometimes is going to be Transmigration Prophecy. This card is very good against Gigavise. It can definitely shut down a lot of your combo. It can be really devastating because it can hit both of your Lone Fire Blossoms. So you'll have two Lone Fires, you're playing around DD Crow, but then they flip up Transmigration Prophecy, and maybe, you know, your only two plants were those two Lone Fires, and now Gigaplant is completely blanking. So this is another excellent piece of interaction. Easy B tier. Nothing wrong with B tier. B tier is really solid. You know, S tier, these are like the creme de la creme, the very best. A tier, you know, these are the huge problems. But this card is very good. It's just kept in B tier, similar to a lot of these other, point of interaction spell and traps. Because you can just destroy it or trunate it or something like that before it goes off. Next up, Chain Disappearance. I've had this hit on me. Because we have Prio, it's really limited in how good it is. But frankly, the most devastating thing I've seen it hit is like Dandy Tokens. However, it's not applicable in enough matchups to really be great. And there's just better options. So many more impactful traps, I think. So for that reason, I am going to delegate this card into the bottom of C tier. All right, next up, Threatening Roar. This is a good card in the mirror. This is a good card in my main deck. This also can just be really rough. The decks that are playing Threatening Roar, you know, you go for a big push or you drop your Trunade and then they flip Threatening Roar. And you know that, you know,
you're now in danger of being hit with JD or Dad or something on the next turn. So just like it's like the number one cleanest way to stop your opponent in their tracks. So I would go ahead and consider Threatening Roar to be an S tier threat. That is how good I think Threatening Roar is against Gigavise. Next up, we've got Necrogardna. This is a pretty common card, and I think the best thing this does is it prevents you from really doing a Colossal Fighter Armory Arm OTK. However, it's telegraphed, it's pretty easy to see, it's pretty easy to play around. I think a lot of smart value players will dump this on turn 1, but oftentimes I see that, okay, they've dumped the Necrogardna, and I know that that's just lowering their ceiling, and I'm still going to put enough monsters on the field to clear their Greffer, so they're not getting another dump. And I've seen a lot of games where they did try and play it safe with the Necrogardna, and it boxes them out of the game. But I do think Necrogardna belongs in B tier because it can shut down their Colossal Armory Arm. It can create a lot of situations where you just can't quite OTK, and then they'll win with Dad or JD or Laris or something like that. So definitely a B tier threat. Next up, we have DD Crow. This card is really devastating when they chain it to your Supervise and banish your Gigaplant. However, we do have counterplay options to that in the form of DDR, and also, especially games 2 and 3, you can really expect DD Crow to be in, and we're going to try and take lines that play around it effectively. So for that reason, I would consider it a B tier threat. All these B tier threats, these are legitimately good cards, and a lot of them are worth playing. I think DD Crow is definitely worth citing, especially for a lot of decks, but we do have sufficient counterplay for it. Continuing on the theme with hand traps, Honest is a really good card. It can present a huge problem. It can help your opponent push for game, especially combined with cards like Archlord Christia. It can be absolutely devastating. However, our OTK lines can go through Power Tool Dragon to get a guaranteed search for something like a Mark of the Rose, and that is going to let us just get Honest to be completely played around. Pretty much anytime you see a light monster, you're going to be trying to play around Honest. So for that reason, I can't put Honest any higher than C tier. Pollute is the same way. I'm always assuming Blackwings have Pollute. I'm always playing around it. I'm going into lots of power tools to steal their one Blackwing with a Mark of the Rose when I'm going for game. So I will also consider that to be a C tier threat. Herald of Orange Light is an A tier threat. This card is a problem. There is no good counterplay for it. A lot of times against fairies, you're forced to be in a position where you just have to combo, and you're just like, well, if you have the orange light, I lose. If you don't have it, then I'm gonna win. And that really stinks. That really stinks that like the only real counterplay you could have to orange light is siding in something like Prohibition yourself and calling orange light. That of course would be terrible. The silver lining is that they do have to discard 2 cards out of their hand to use it, but if they're using it smart, it can really just completely shut you down. And especially combined with Christia, just absolutely devastating. Next up, we have Tragodia. Tragodia is a card that can help your opponent not die. However, Tragodia is so juicy to steal with Mark of the Rose. Just using its level modulation, you can synchro with it. A lot of times, you can even do something nasty. I remember this quick draw player came to my locals, and this is before like Gigavise was like a known quantity, and I was just messing around with it. And we get to game 3, and he lives my combo turn by dropping a Tragodia, and I had a bricked Titanial in my hand that I wasn't able to summon as part of my combo. And he goes on his turn, and he probably like pitches a Caius to steal my my Gigaplant, and he pushes in for almost game, almost lethal, and he ends on Tragodia and Stardust Dragon and maybe another monster. I think it was just Tragodia Stardust, and I go my turn, Mark of the Rose, take your Tragodia, discard Titanial, take your Stardust, attack for game. So that's just my little fun Tragodia story. It's really good because it can stop OTKs. It can help your opponent live for one more turn, and that can be pretty devastating. But it's also something that we're expecting. We're playing around Colossal Armory Arm lines, play through it. So I am going to give it to be a C tier threat. Gores, however, is way more devastating. I think Gores is a really big problem. I think the number one way that Young Punts manifests himself in my gameplay is me failing to play around Gores. What can I say? I just say, oh, he doesn't have it. He doesn't have it. There's no way he has it. And then, of course, they always have it. But Gores is one of the best cards that you can play to help live against Gigavise. And if you're smart and you're just not leaving Colossal Armory Arm targets up and you have Gores, it's really, really hard for us to kill you through it. We can do it. It can be done. But Gores is a big problem, and it can win games all on its own. So I would consider Gores to be an A-tier threat against Gigavise. Definitely a big problem to have to deal with. Battle Fader is similar to Tragodia, but the fact that it just ends the battle phase outright, I think B-tier for Battle Fader makes a lot of sense. Any of these cards that are stopping your OTKs are pretty good. Next up, I want to talk about Dupe Frog here for the dupe lock. D for dupe lock here. It's so easy to out between Mistworm, between Black Rose, which you can make with Supervise, makes the dupe lock miss timing. If they leave a Substitute up, you can do shenanigans where you just put a Dupe Frog in attack, steal the other one, put it face down with Book of Moon, something like that, and then attack for game. I think the reason we have such a good frog matchup is because a big way that frogs are able to win games is because of Dupe Frog, but we can answer it way too effectively. Next up, I want to talk about Spirit Reaper. Spirit Reaper is a really cool card. The defense position of Spirit Reaper can't be destroyed by battle, so a lot of times you'll be able to live for an extra turn because of it. Also, it is so good to be ripping cards out of your opponent's hand with Spirit Reaper by attacking directly. If I'm in a situation where, I'm trying to find my one missing combo piece, my two missing combo pieces, and then you Spirit Reaper and you hit that Supervise that I was holding, now even if I draw Lone Fire next turn, I don't have my Supervise anymore. So that can be really, really crazy. The one downside to this is that if you're doing that where you're trying to rip cards out of my hand and you miss and you hit something that's not so relevant, you take a Titanial, a Tuner, a Gigaplant or something out of my hand, and now you have an attack position Spirit Reaper that I can just attack over with everything in the game. So I'm going to put Spirit Reaper in B tier. I think it is a legitimate threat. If I was constructing like an anti-Gigavise deck, I would definitely have Spirit Reaper in it. But because it's so risky to leave it in attack position, it's such an easy way to get OTK'd through Gore's Trag, Battle Fader, that kind of thing, I can't justify putting it any higher than B tier. But I also think that this is kind of like one of the most underrated counter Gigavise cards. I don't think everyone is really considering it, but I'm here to tell you, Spirit Reaper, big problem. X-Saber Airbellum is really the same way. Just the fact that X-Sabers are threatening to just rip cards out of your hand if you're opening slow makes that matchup really difficult, I gotta say. Rescue Cat resolving in a situation where you're dead drawing, that's GG. I mean, it's GG. Rescue Cat resolving, getting 2 attacks, 2 hand rips is a big problem. But then I think X-Sabers are also just so threatening because you don't want to set your hand either, because then you'll just, do the Chun-Li synchro, and then you're in a big problem as well. All right, let's talk about Cyber Dragon. Cyber Dragon is a card that a lot of people are citing in to go ahead and answer your Power Tool Dragon. However, we all know this, we're all expecting it, and for that reason, it is going to go in C tier for Cyber Dragon. It's nice to answer the Power Tool Dragons and get your little 2000 Chimera attack up. Combined with Cyber Eleton, definitely really good, but I wouldn't waste one of my side deck slots if I'm siding for Gigavise with a Cyber Dragon. There's a lot of better options out there. I want to talk about Arcus. This is just like randomly really good. If you normal summon it, it's threatening Honest, and now I can't Mark of the Rose any of your monsters to try and play around Honest. And weirdly enough, like Arcus is one of the biggest problems with Lightsworns for this deck. It just gets in the way. It's always threatening Honest. Sometimes you're just forced to call their bluff and attack into it, and then they don't have the honest. But just the fact that it's shutting off Mark of the Rose in specifically Lightsworns ends up being crazy relevant. It's a big problem. You can't Colossal Fighter Armory Arm on like a Celestia with Arcus up. I would actually consider this to be a B tier threat. Next up, I got the big fish here because I do want to talk about fish OTK. This deck, I haven't seen it in a while. I feel like it's gotten less popular because it's just a little worse than Forgs and Gigavise. But this is definitely a deck that can just kind of surprise you out of nowhere. The fish is going to stop your discard traps from going off, and it can be a big problem. So I would consider this, kind of similar to Lowliest, where this is just like a boss monster that can represent a threat. If you're opening slow, something like that, this is a fast deck that can cause some problems for you. Let's talk about Autonomous Action Unit as a threat. This is something that in the Mirror Match games 2 and 3 you want to be considering. You want to be playing around Autonomous Action Unit. You want to be trying to keep Lone Fires out of the graveyard. Easier said than done. But you also you don't want to just be doing like a subpar fragile board that leaves a Lone Fire in grave, because then maybe they get the AAU off. So this isn't a threat in the same way a lot of these other cards are threats, but I did want to talk about it because it's something that you want to be aware of. And just the fact that your opponent is threatening to get a Lone Fire for themselves for free, I do think AAU is an A tier threat. I mean, think about it. 100% of Gigavise decks, I think, have an AAU in their side deck, and they're always citing it in the mirror. So that sounds like an A tier threat to me. I don't know about you guys. I want to talk about Caius. This is one of the most common removal techniques in the format. However, it's just so weak into Titanial. The fact that Titanial, it doesn't just stop the effect, but it's also going to take the Caius off the field. That's just infinite minus. I feel like Caius just absolutely sucks against Gigavise. I'm going to put it in D tier. Raikou, very similar, one of the most common removal cards in the format. But frankly, it is just, it's too easy to answer with Stardust, with Titanial. I can't tell you how many times my opponents hit me with the just mill, and, I know that feels bad for them. But Raikou, I am going to consider, just like Caius, to be a D tier threat. Just not that big of a problem. We're almost at the end here, folks. Next up, I want to talk about Soul Release. This is a card just like Kaiku that is just straight up bad. Don't side this into Gigavise. It's not good. I genuinely think every single time my opponent has dropped a Soul Release on me, I've just DDR'd and won, or it just has not mattered. It's so slow. It's not reactive at all. You're in your main phase, you're Soul Releasing, you're clearing my graveyard, and I'm just okay. You just went -1 for nothing, and you probably set up my DDR. So just not at all worth your side deck slot, not worth your time. Don't bother with Soul Release. Trap Dust Shoot is interesting because, kind of similar to Deck Devastation Virus. If you hit that key card with Dust Shoot, it's so good. Getting the hand knowledge is so good too. You can see what kind of position your Gigavise opponent is in. However, there's so many times where it just blanks and it just ends up being a -1. So because it can win the game, it can be an FTK, and it's not as costly as Deck Devastation Virus, I will put it in C tier. But frankly, I don't think it is the best option. Gigavise. My Body as a Shield I've got on here just because, this is a card that maybe they'll play to negate your Black Rose or something like that. But it's really just not going to be super impactful. Maybe if you could negate Heavy Storm too, then we're talking. But I don't know. Just so rare. So rare. I guess, it could also negate a Titanial on your Caius, but that's just so many cards, and you need to draw it at the right time, and it's going to be, in the way and dead more often than not. So we'll call that a D tier card. Next up, Starlight Road. This is a big problem. It can stop your Heavy Storm. That's the main thing it's going to do, and you get into some positions where you kind of just have to say, oh, well, I've got a Heavy, and I've got to hope you don't have Starlight, and then they do have Starlight, and then you lose. So for that reason, it is a big problem. Fortunately, Giant Trunade exists. If we had 2 Heavy Storm instead of Heavy and Giant Trunade, I would put this in A tier, but because we can also just trunate and it doesn't do anything there, I'm thinking it's B tier. It does have applications, stopping a black rose. I've had that happen, and that always feels really terrible. I think the best way to use Starlight Road is to really to hide it. Just like set Starlight Road and then set your best trap. Then your opponent isn't even going to think twice. They'll drop the Heavy Storm on 2, you flip the Starlight Road, and you win. So Starlight Road, B tier threat. Let's talk Colossal Fighter. Colossal Fighter is so good because it can crash with Titanial, summon itself back, and then clear another monster. So big problem. Also, Colossal Fighter, Armory Arm. Sometimes we're leaving up a Giga, they get the Titanial off the board. Colossal Fighter can be a big problem for us. So I will put that as a B tier threat. Catastor, I do want to discuss it as a threat. We don't really have any dark monsters outside of our extra deck. Catastor can be really useful for clearing your board. If you're just on like Giga Titanial, it's a really clean answer to Titanial. However, unless it's in a situation where, okay, we're Catastor, we're clearing the Titanial, and then we're winning, it's not going to be that impactful. So I would call Catastor a C tier threat. Next up, we have Goyo Guardian. This card is very, very good at cracking your board because it can take your Gigaplant and it'll resolve as Chain Link 2 since it's an optional effect. Supervise is a mandatory effect, so it'll be Chain 1. So it'll force your Supervise to resolve without effect unless you already have your second Gigaplant in graveyard. But this is one of the key ways that decks are going to go about breaking your board. So I would consider it a B tier threat, B for board breaker. And then finally, maybe the biggest threat to Gigavise of all is bricking. It doesn't matter what your opponent have. If you just brick, you're going to lose. However, the deck is far more consistent than people who don't play it want to say. The bricks feel so bad and it feels like they happen all the time, but I got to say, they just don't, and a good Gigavise pilot can play around bricking. I would call it B tier. This is all the threats I could think of. Just so many that we're going to have to zoom out one more time. But here is your final tier list. If you skipped to the end of the video, you missed out on a lot of good information. I'm sure you'll want to go back and watch all of this and listen to me yap about every single card that you see here as we rank the tier list of Gigavise threats. So this has been Dionysus, aka Young Puds. Let me know if you'd like to see more tier list videos. Let me know if you think I should never make one again, but definitely subscribe either way. Smash that friggin' like button, and we do have a Discord, so the link is in the description. Go ahead and join, talk about Gigavise, talk about life, whatever you want. All right, I'll see you guys there, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care, everyone.